Hi, everyone, and welcome back to OTTB On Tap. I'm Neve.
And I'm Emily. Hey, Neve, what's on tap today?
Today, we're joined by Clare and Tom Mansmann of Pacific Farms in Hume, Virginia. They are lifelong and generational horsemen with experience through the CCI 4-star level of eventing, as well as show hunters, jumpers, dressage, fox hunting, and even a little ranch work. Clare has also been a guest blogger and writer for Eventing Nation, and we'll leave a link in the show notes to a roundup of all of her articles. Reading through them, I've got this sense that we could talk for hours about off-the-track thoroughbreds. So Clare and Tom, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So I don't know who wants to go first, but we'd love to just do a little dive into your backgrounds in equestrian sports and then also how you came to co-found Pacific Farms. So Clare, you want to start?
Fire away.
So let's see. I grew up actually in Southern California with a non-horsey family, and I got riding lessons as a birthday present when I was little. And that was definitely what happened after that is not what my parents thought was going to happen. Not what they intended, even slightly. And my family moved to Texas, and that's where I got a horse and got into eventing. And then I was on the young rider team when I was in high school, and the O'Connors, Karen O'Connor was our coach for Area 5. And so she actually went to Florida before I finished high school with them for the winter. And then they brought me back to Virginia, and I just never ended up going home, which is not a totally uncommon story.
Emily, this sounds a little familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's how I got just into riding. And looking back, we could definitely see, I can see old videos of me in the show ring and the hunter ring in California, and it was all on thoroughbreds, but I didn't even know that's what everybody was riding. Tom had already started Pacific Farms when we actually met.
Oh, okay.
But I started working for him. This is skipping ahead because I'd broken both of my arms falling off of a racehorse.
Galloping race.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my God.
I needed a job. So that's actually, we'd known each other before that, just from the scene out here. But I started riding racehorses because my horse was going advanced, and he was really fast and would run off with me a lot. And I was really scared.
Wait, I just have to just interject a really quick question. Did by any chance Jimmy Wofford say to you, if you want to learn how to ride your horse, you should go gallop racehorses?
So actually I was with Karen at the time. So Karen, and they did,
By
she
way
said,
of Jimmy, though.
but she learned it from Jimmy. So
I was going to say, that seems like a Jimmy thing.
Yeah.
So Karen sent me to start riding on the track. And then I just fell in love with it, actually. And then right around then, I started riding with Jimmy, and he loved that I rode on the track. And then when I would get a little bit run off with more than I should have, or if he thought I needed to be more fit, he would just gently say, can you ask them to put you on some of the stronger horses?
And you're like, great.
Yeah. And then Tom can talk about how he started Pacific Farms. It just so worked that we're both from Southern California, but we met out here.
Oh, that's cool.
We already named the business Pacific Farms, which has worked out really well for the both of us.
Yeah. It's a little serendipitous.
Yeah.
And how about you, Tom? How can you give us a little info about your background?
Yeah, as we say to our children, back in the 1900s. Yeah, so I grew up with horses. My father is a veterinarian, an equine veterinarian. And so we grew up as a family, literally on a property where my father had his equine practice. So we always had horses. I have two other brothers. And I was introduced to ride, and my father rode. He rode all the way up until veterinary school. He actually did ride in a few point-to-point races.
Oh, wow.
And he's an A pony clubber. My mother is an A pony clubber. They're both, as we were talking, they're both from Pennsylvania. And on my father's side, his mother was a very accomplished horsewoman, and she was also one of the early women masters of a fox hunt in Pennsylvania as well. And her father immigrated from England, and he was a professional horseman, and he came here to work for a family to manage their horses and so forth. I guess from that, it makes it more of a generational thing. We were introduced to riding, and my father both my parents owned racehorses and did some very small scale breeding. And at the time, their practice in Southern California, they did a lot of work for thoroughbred operations that were running at Santa Anita. Back then, Hollywood Park was still around, Golden Gate. And I do remember, I have a childhood memory of going to see my parents taking us to Tijuana, Mexico to watch one of their horses actually run in a race. Fast forward, we were introduced to riding as children, and I got into other team sports as well. I really loved baseball and basketball. But I started getting serious about riding when I was introduced to 3D eventing. I think I was about 13 years old. A man named Don Sacchi, who's still with us, went from the East Coast to the West Coast at the time. And he started me because I was riding local hunters with my mom, liked to do show hunters. So as I started to get introduced to eventing, I thought, this is really interesting. And I got the bug. I was able to do a couple long format 3 days back in the day on the West Coast. And then I came to the East Coast. I was 17 years old, and all I had was a duffel bag. And I worked for a woman named Jessica Ransehousen. Yeah. And she's there in Unionville, Pennsylvania. Yep. Incredibly interesting woman. She's very kind to me. She went to the Olympics in 1960, 1964, and then again in 1988 after raising her 2 children.
That's amazing.
So Jessica had a very big influence on me because I knew that in the sport of 3D eventing, I had to really learn how to do flat work and to be competitive, to do the dressage. So I rode with Jessica for 5.5 years, and with her daughter, Missy. We would drive down from Unionville to Middleburg and take jumping lessons with a man named Wash Bishop. And one summer, Missy and I drove down to Middleburg, and Wash said, I'm going to Europe with 2 horses. Can I hire you to run the business while I'm gone?
Oh, wow.
And I said, sure, that'd be awesome. And I think I had just aged out of the Young Riders. Then it was 21. I'd gone to the Young Rider Championships, I think 2 or 3 times. And so I took the job with Wash, and I ended up working for Wash for about 11 years. And he rode a lot with Jimmy as well, and they all came from the Le Goff kind of era. And he thought it was very important for all of us to gallop racehorses as well. So I galloped for a man named Dougie Fout, who's still at it, for several years. And Claire and I met in Virginia, and then the rest, as they say, is history.
Wow, both of you guys have really fascinating backgrounds, and I do this every time we have anybody on the podcast. But within the first 10 minutes, I'm like, I really want to have them back on again to talk about this. And specifically, Claire, I really want to do a whole episode just about you and your horse, Sunday's Thrill.
Oh, I could take herself.
Yeah. An amazing horse.
An amazing animal. And yeah, we've been dying to have people from the West Coast on. So it's actually really fun to have you guys as a small intro to that a little bit.
In Virginia longer than anywhere else. Hard to get away. I still tell people I'm from Texas, but I only lived there for, I don't know, still there. But
and anytime we meet somebody from California or anywhere on the West Coast, it's always a running joke because it's still to this day to go to one horse trial. If you drive less than 8 hours, you're super excited. So whenever they're introduced to the East Coast, like Claire and I, did initially, and you're like, yeah, there's 12 horse trials within 2 hours. If you have to drive within 2 hours, you're upset. Or if you have to stabling, you're like, oh, this is terrible.
Yeah.
There's things all over the state. So
get so spoiled in this area for sure.
Yes. One of our RRP trainers last year that we had, Annika, she is in Fargo, North Dakota, so not California.
Wow.
But she was telling us how far they have to go, even to go to her trainer. I think it's a 4-hour drive.
Yeah.
She's the horses get really well traveled though. And I was like, hey, I didn't really think about what a great opportunity is to get your horses used to long haul traveling. Because if you're going to Kentucky from basically anywhere in the country, it's a haul. Yeah. It was very interesting just hearing about how she manages to train throughout the winters and stuff.
Like I've seen the Fargo movie. It doesn't look
it doesn't look pleasant.
No.
It does not look pleasant.
And just the access to not only to trainers, but like good veterinarians, good fixers.
Yes.
We still have friends that like ship to us from 5-6 hours away just to use our farrier.
Yeah. And we actually talk about that quite a bit because it's one of the reasons that we started the podcast to begin with, because we have this Facebook group, OTTB Market, and it has 100,000 members in it. And you realize that many people that own horses live in deserts in terms of like veterinarians, farriers, trainers, even just basic stuff. And these sort of common questions pop up and your initial reaction is, well, you should already know that maybe. But if you don't have access to professionals to talk to, then how would you know any of that? Or if you didn't do Pony Club so you answered this a little bit regarding your background with off the track thoroughbreds, but in your program at your farm, is that pretty much your specialization at this time? And what do you find the most rewarding about working with thoroughbreds in general?
Yeah.
What's funny is not necessarily at all our specialization. Claire and I both have a heart for thoroughbred horses, but we work with all horses.
Yeah.
We have a barn full of, we've got Irish, we got drafts, do they still even do PMU babies? We've got a PMU.
I don't know.
Yeah.
We got a little bit of a name doing the thoroughbreds because I think we started talking about it. We didn't realize, quite frankly, that it's more unusual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's
so just going back to, I don't know, it's like on the couch with the psychologist, but going back to the childhood thing, my dad, I do remember, because he did breed some horses and he worked with other thoroughbred operations, our early horses were thoroughbreds.
Yeah.
We had one pony, and it was like a monster pony, and I got off the pony as soon as possible. One of my favorite horses was literally a horse where his name was Finesse Man, and he was a thoroughbred horse, and he came up from Santa Anita, and he had, my father specialized in upper respiratory disease in horses, so he had what's called shipping fever or pleural pneumonia. Anyway, long story short, the owner decided that they didn't want the horse anymore. And of course, my dad's a super softie. They're like, hey, Dr. Mansmann, why don't you just keep him and maybe your boys can ride him? So here's this 3-year-old colt that needed to be castrated. And he survived the pleural pneumonia, but he ended up having what's called a pleural fistula. So he had a permanent hole in the side right where you put the girth, because they had to tap. This could be a whole nother podcast, but he had pneumonia so bad that they had to tap the side of his chest to drain all the fluid out.
Oh, wow.
But this horse actually lived, but he still had this permanent, think of an earring open, and he had a small hole in the side of his ribs for the rest of his life.
Oh my God.
Well, fast forward, the horse gets sent out to the East Coast. I get to the Radnor 3-day event. I'm a young rider. I'm in the Radnor 3-day event, and I have to jog the horse up with a hole in its side. So it was a wonderful horse. Obviously, I had no idea what I was doing. I was just like 16 years old and headed to like the second 3-day I've ever done.
And clearly he was okay if he was in a 3-day, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
he just had a hole.
Stanley just had a hole in his side.
Oh, my God.
I go up to the jog, and it was Kent Allen and Kathy Cohn and somebody else, like serious. And
I remember them very well.
So I had to start making jokes right away. Otherwise, like, they would just be like flabbergasted. Like, how are we going to pass this horse with a hole in his side? So I was like, hey, Dr. Allen, how's it going? And I was like, yeah, so he has a hole in his side, but he's fine. Anyway, the horse finished. We did great. I think we were top 3 or something like that. And it was
wild.
A classic example of how awesome these horses are. Here's this teenager out doing probably what I shouldn't have been doing. He's just such a good boy. Had a wonderful gallop and a big jump and just everything that makes up a classic there.
Yeah, that's a great story. We love like underdog stories like that. And also when I was reading about your horse, Claire, it reminded me so much of Emily's horse, Alex. And in so many ways, I feel like I should just leave the chat. You guys just catch up about the good old days.
I feel
That's
like
so
you
amazing.
posted something recently, Claire, about getting run away with, and it sounded very resemblatory of my time eventing back then.
Together. What's funny about that horse is that he was not an off-the-track thoroughbred.
Oh, he was?
He was an appendix quarter horse.
Oh my God, that's funny.
So he had some, I bet he looked like a thoroughbred. Way more thoroughbred than
he looked like he looked more of a thoroughbred than Buff Dude looks like a thoroughbred. But people I rode with for years had no idea, except I would get a lot of AQHA awards.
Oh, that's cool.
He was the only one. So I got like really cool ribbons and points and stuff like that since he was papered. But he necessitated me to learn how to ride a race, which is really interesting, actually, when you think about it, because maybe blame is the wrong word, but a lot of people blame a lot on the track.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And maybe sometimes, but actually sometimes just not. It's just the way these horses, they're built to run.
Yeah.
And horses listen to our bodies and they listen to our intention and they listen to how we feel about them. And they listen to us more than they should sometimes, and maybe more than we should. And can I say that Jake would have run off with me now today if me now started him? Probably not, because I know who started him, and he ran off with me the day I tried him. Can you imagine?
Classic.
Yeah, that person that like showed the horse to me, being like, that was always an interesting thing, because even looking back, he rode just like an off-track thoroughbred, but he identified as one.
Well, yeah.
That is amazing. I'm trying to think back to something you were saying, but I find that where you said that sometimes people blame the track, I find that really interesting, because I am on a new adventure personally with a homebred horse, and I at times am like, gosh, I wish I could send you to the track so you could learn some stuff.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to teach you every little thing, because I'm used to getting them. They already know how to do everything. You just have to speak their language.
Yeah.
It's been interesting.
You almost take it for granted until you see what's out there that hasn't raced or hasn't been.
Oh, yeah.
We were sent recently some horses that they were 4 and 5 years old, and they were completely feral.
Oh boy.
They were thoroughbreds, but that didn't.
They had halters on, but they arrived like in a cattle stock trailer.
Oh no.
No, they didn't have halters on. Some point they'd had halters on, but somebody had taken the halters off and there were no halters on.
Yeah.
Oh jeez.
Anyway, so just the being able to catch a horse is when you go out to a field and the horse like comes to you, that is amazing.
Gives you a whole new appreciation.
And for the horses that have raced quite a bit, and they've seen jumbotrons and they've seen crowds, and they've been, like we were talking about earlier, on and off different vans. They've been bandaged, they've been tied.
Give us a horse that's been on the track and certainly that's raced.
Yeah, I can super agree with that. Today I was actually at the farm and I just got a new 4-year-old off the track, hopefully for the RRP, and the fox hunt leaves
I saw your post.
right from our farm, basically. And my barn manager's, oh no, they were done hours ago. And lo and behold, they were out for a really long hunt, or they lost the hounds or something. But they were coming back, and his paddock is like right by the road. And so all day long, this is going. Now, my quarter horse, loses his mind to the point that like I can't ride him the day the hunt comes through. Can't catch him, can't ride him. Yeah. I go down and I haven't done anything with him in 5 days. And he was high octane when I brought him up. But there's just something about being able to tap into that and understand like how to just manage it and say, okay, it's time to work now. And just knowing that work ethic is already baked in is so nice, because they just want something to do and they want their brain to be engaged. And I don't know, it was pretty awesome.
For Claire and I, the fact that we had the ability to work on the track and gallop horses and be around and work with race horses, which just so happens we both really love. That was the golden years of our riding kind of memories and so forth. But connecting those dots of, okay, what do these horses do? And going out in sets and working a horse. We got to break horses out of a gate. It's like really cool stuff. And then you go, oh, okay. I guess at the end of the day, to be a good horse trainer, we want to really try to think like a horse. What do they need? What are they looking for? What are they spooking at? Or what? And so being able to actually work on a track and gallop racehorses and connect that with after race training was really special for us. And I think very enlightening, super enlightening.
Yeah, it simplifies it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure. Yeah. Having just all of the pieces of the puzzle there to work with.
All right. So we got a little off track, but let's get back on.
That's totally fine.
Since you all are such great advocates for the retraining process and off-track thoroughbreds, we have some questions for you. The first one is, do you have a specific philosophy or method when it comes to retraining off-track thoroughbreds? And how does it differ from traditional training approaches? I think that kind of piggybacks on what we were getting at there. But
I think we've simplified it over the years, because now we've gotten to, there's a point where we're always developing, but you're developing a method and then you're using the method. And I think what we really look at with the horses is you're going down the checklist, looking at figuring out what they know. Mm-hmm. We're really blessed now. We have a couple connections that send us horses that joke, like when we talk about the feral horses that came, like we get on them and we're like, okay, this is just easy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we do have a run through of what do they know. So we usually get on them when they come, barring any other issues or something like that. We usually hop on and see what they feel like. But then we go pretty quickly to doing a lot of groundwork. And then a big thing that has gotten talked about with us a lot, and that we talk about a lot, is that we pony them a lot.
Oh, nice.
And we introduce them. Before you get to the ponying, we make sure, how are they leading, driving from the ground, all of that. And they'll do that all over the farm. And it's just good for their bodies. We get to know them so well. And I think for both of us, when you go to get on a horse that you have some information on, but we don't ask a lot of questions, quite frankly. Yeah. We're going on the trust process that everything's fine. And it usually we can tell, unless it's somebody we really don't know. But you just learn so much about the horse's reactions as well. So you feel pretty comfortable with what they do. And then we get them out ponying, and it's so good, for their bodies, their fitness, their feet, and all of that. But also they go with the pony horse, they go on hacks. We've taken them hunting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's it. It's an interesting thing, but each horse you have to assess, because they could be a 2-year-old, they could be an 11-year-old. They could have had some horses, you don't know how much under saddle they've done, or if they have any minor thing, like quirkiness, if you will, about girthing or something like that.
So the easiest is typically the horses that came off their last race, because you're like, well,
yeah.
They've had a rider on recently.
Yeah,
they should know what that's all about.
Yeah.
There's nothing scarier than being like, I was told its last race was like three weeks ago. And then you look up the race record and it's a year and 3 weeks. Okay.
You're like, what have you been doing?
Whoops.
So everything from arriving with race plates on.
Yes. Then you're like, yes.
And you just went on Equibase and it's true.
Yes.
The horse was
verified
out for X amount of time.
Yeah.
So we do, Claire was saying, we interact with them right away. The old school thing would be like, turn them out in the field for the summer or several months or whatever. And that may be necessary, but initially we want to just interact with them right away.
Yeah.
Assess their soundness just on a circle like that. Mm-hmm. That's one thing. I think long term, we've really realized that any horse, not just the thoroughbred horse, but sometimes more specifically the thoroughbred horse, they're going to need some hoof care, because the style in general of shoeing race horses, thoroughbred horses on the track, can be different than the shoeing that they may need as a sport horse.
Yeah.
So the foot is something we pay close attention to from day one. Like Claire was saying, we introduce them to unmounted groundwork, and we do use the pony horse. And it's the older I get, the more I realize.
He stopped saying.
He almost said we. He made this little glance over at you.
I've been aging backwards.
That's
so.
right.
That's how I feel.
But yeah, we've gotten to the point where we can introduce these horses to almost anything before we get on them.
Yeah.
So water jumps, banks, ditches, hacking out, going through cattle, fox hunting, being around hounds, like everything we can now do. And then we'll go, because again, 30 years ago, I would just get on it.
Yeah.
Ride it through the field of cows, or get on the horse and trot over the ditch or try to.
Right.
Now with this method, it is so frictionless. It's unbelievable. Yeah. It's just unbelievable. Again, that's making some assumptions that a lot of those basics are understood, that they lead, they load, they drive. Danny has really, I guess I wanted to insert that part. Claire and I either take a riding lesson, a clinic, online clinic, or read a book, a new book, or a podcast or something about how to train a horse on a weekly basis. So we're so hungry to learn. Our method, if you will, has definitely evolved. And if you interviewed us 5 years ago, we would go, we do this and this. And I don't think there's anything, I think it's just quite honestly gotten better and better.
Yeah.
And we've learned a lot from the horses.
Yeah. And I think it's important to, like you're saying, I think the subtext of this is that you can never know too much about horses in general. And one of the big takeaways, I didn't get to ride with Jimmy. Unfortunately, I never had a horse I could actually ride with him. But I went to every time he taught a lesson up here, no matter where it was, I would go and audit and walk around cross country courses and just listen. And then I would ask him questions afterwards. And you better believe if he told me a book to get, I went right out and got the book and read it. And I think there's something to be said for the types of people that really and truly want to learn in all of its formats. Emily and I both are a big supporter of finding techniques online, signing up for workshops is just as much as you can get into. And we're so lucky at our farm because it's a thoroughbred breeding facility as well that we get access to the very beginnings of it. And when the horses come back off the track and get retrained. So we're still very much immersed. But yeah, I think you have to continue that evolution for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much to learn. That's why it's even funny to even do like a podcast or something like
yeah.
Well, I'm like, I don't know. One, because I'm still so young, obviously. And there's just so much. We were really blessed. We got to spend a lot of time with Jimmy before he passed.
Yeah.
And the last few years, he would just come out sometimes just to be around, just to talk horses.
Yeah. Just
to talk about it. He would just come hang out. And because he still just loved horses. And he was still thinking about things and revising things. And I have sketches for a set of gymnastics that's different than the sketch that's in his book. And I'm like, well, which one do I pick? So he was still changing things, and he was still, and that's actually the last conversation we had. He said, you guys now are I wrote it down because it was special, but basically
Jimmyisms that we should have written down. But
you guys are now entrusted with, like you're the next generation, right? That's going to bring up these horses. So you have to write stuff down, and you have to take things that other people did. He said, take things that I did and change them, but write it down.
Yeah,
and write down what worked. So he was like, look at page whatever on the book and work through it and do it differently, and then write down if it worked or not. That's your job. And so that's still what we're doing with the horses, is taking something and going, that was really helpful with this horse. And you try it on the next horse. You're like, well, it really didn't change that horse. And like, whatever. And just trying to not get complacent that every horse is the same, but at the same time, you can have a consistency that allows you to help a broad range of horses, because you know what you're looking for and you know what you're asking.
Yeah. And I think we're all just trying to understand them better. I think about this more times a week than I should, but that it's amazing to me that horses will do anything for us. Mm-hmm. And I'm constantly in awe of that. Sometimes I think about my dogs, for example, and I'm like, why can I control a 1,200 pound animal better than my two dogs?
Our horses are so much better trained than our dogs.
I think that's a common horse person trait.
But sometimes you're on the end of the leash rope and something crazy is happening, and the horse is looking at you like, tell me this is okay in the way that you've taught me. And then you go, I'm like, oh my God, it's magical a little bit.
And not to get all like, I don't know, scientific about it, but they're herbivores.
Yeah.
And we are carnivores, meat or not. And the fact that, and it blows your mind if you really ponder
that they even want to be around us.
Will act right.
It's bananas.
Whenever it has a horse like stop at a jump, and it never feels good when a horse stops at a jump. Nobody likes it, but everybody gets deflated and they get upset, or they can't do this, they can't do that. And I'm like, we should never be surprised that they stop at a jump.
Why? Be surprised they jump.
Every time they jump, we should go, oh my gosh, wow, amazing. So you want to set up for success. And yes, you've trained them and you've put it into them, but we should really be at the very least pleasantly surprised every time we jump, let alone should we ever, we really shouldn't be surprised when they stop. We should be like, I would.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's pretty incredible.
I did have a question about, we've talked a lot about eventing and now groundwork and fox hunting. Do you point the horses and the thoroughbreds that you retrain at specific disciplines, or do you let them tell you what they want to do? How do you assess what they might be good at, and how does that influence your training?
Yeah, I think with each horse, there's a little bit of, it's probably hard to describe, so maybe it's more from experience, but you can look at some body types just conformationally and decide what direction you might lean towards. But even those, that will sometimes surprise you. In general, thoroughbreds are so athletic, they literally can do anything. Economically, when it comes to resale, we don't do a lot of, but we're conscious that we are not a not-for-profit, but we have a little business. There are economic roles that I think are more profitable if the horse can meet those careers. Unfortunately, we're seeing that start to dwindle more and more, but that's a whole nother conversation. So if the horse shows some scope in their movement and in their jump, and you usually can see that without a very large jump, and you can usually see that at the walk and the canter, quite frankly. So the same thing that you would be looking for in buying your 2-year-old or your yearling at Basic Tipton sales, we're looking for as well. That scope to the walk and the jump. From there, what I mean by maybe some size or some conformational things, if it happens to be a smaller mare, they may be more sought after, for example, in the sport of polo. And I think if they showed that they have some kind of classical form when they're jumping, again, through a small gymnastic, or we like to start them over logs and kind of cross country, then maybe the show hunters could be a route for them. But I think in general, without putting the horses ever in a box, we start them with all of those opportunities. So they're started outside of the arena, inside of the arena. They're started with the fundamentals of flat work, whether that moves into upper level dressage or it's just basic balance, rhythm and balance. They're introduced to jumping, whether they're going to be a jumping horse or not. Again, these are all things that preclude that they've already been evaluated, that they're ready and sound to do these things at a very low level or initially. We introduce them to trail riding and riding out and all the things that they would see in the hunt field or in a working ranch situation. So we are very blessed to have the facility that we could introduce the horses to literally all 10 of the careers that the Retired Racehorse Project features. That's how we start, and then we let the horses choose their path.
Yeah. And it is true around here too, much like where you guys are. Like, we can take a horse to an event one weekend, it can hunt during the week, and then we can go to a hunter show or go to Upperville. So we'll take them, we use all the opportunities. So we can have a horse that's going to be geared towards eventing or fox hunting, but Upperville has this schooling series. So we're going to go to Upperville. It's such an opportunity for them. They don't have to win. We don't, you know what I mean? They need to go, and then they can win later. And I think that's something we really think about too, is we like to get them off the property. We like to get them going to things. They don't have to go win right away. They have to go, and they have to learn how to compete and learn how to be that horse that if somebody wants, they can tie to their bumper pull trailer at the back and leave it all day and go to the hunt breakfast. And that's the all around horse. And then some of them have talent for significantly more, but if they don't have those things, then that talent doesn't really matter very much. Yeah. Because what are you going to do with it?
I didn't grow up around show hunters or anything like that, but I have to say my exposure to the world of show hunters has made me understand something incredibly special about those horses. And it's that they put in and do more, and not in a bad way, in a way that, like, I think is from an outsider's viewpoint, oh, it's just so easy and so nice, and they just go in and they pop around. And I photographed the Fairhill Thoroughbred show last year, So I was there all day for both days photographing, and I was mesmerized by these horses, going in, doing a model class, coming out, doing the equitation, being in a ring with 40 other thoroughbreds cantering around. And it was just, I don't know, it was just amazing. I was like, these horses are good horses, man. It's really cool. These horses are incredible. They're so broke. They just stand, they go in the ring.
They learn patience.
They learn patience. They like go do the model class. They go in an equitation class with 35 other horses, all going around, some of them with like limited steering, seemingly. And I was beyond impressed. We're getting into this a little bit, but how do you guys, what are your viewpoints in terms of nutrition, general care, horse husbandry, and turnout, those types of things? Like, what's your general philosophy? Obviously, it differs from horse to horse. And you got into it a little bit before when you were talking about not just chucking them out in a field for 6 months.
Yeah.
I think so. In general, I would say we're a little bit old school in as far as classically trained. So again, my parents were both A pony clubbers. And so we were pretty much taught at a young age. And with my father being a veterinarian, how to bandage, how to assess if a horse has an abscess and things like that. And then working for Jessica for those years, taking care of literally pre-St. George Grand Prix dressage horses, that was a whole kind of thing of its own, just because of the dressage as a sport and also the value of those horses. And then when I worked for Wash Bishop, he was vying for the Olympics for those 12 years, so 3 different Olympics, and taking care of 3-day event horses with their fitness level and nutritional needs was all, it's intermingle all of that. And then with Claire's experience working for the O'Connors and taking care of top level event horses, we applied all of that into our little business. And so I think the farrier foot balance is really important in our program. Nutritionally, we tend to feed as little high concentrated feeds as possible. So we certainly feed grain, but we feel like horses do really well on good high quality hay, as much pasture as possible. Mm-hmm. And we are comfortable using high concentrations of alfalfa, not as a pellet and not as a cube, but actually like the hay. And for some horses, they get more than others. But in particular, with the horses finishing racing, we have found that we do feel like it helps with stomach mobility and for things like ulcers. Would you agree?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what's funny about the years we spent with the, I don't know if you want to say the high end horses. And of course, some of these race horses were very high end race horses. So it's not that they're low end. It's just that one of the things, I think a big part that we've taken away from our early years of maybe not high stress. Like it really to us wasn't high stress. I think all the people we worked for, it was very high care. The horses were all getting turned out. The horses, they all lived as natural lives in their competitive realm as they could. But it has made us, like we've seen it all.
Yes.
Made us a little bit more relaxed in letting the horse be the horse, and that it can take time and we don't need to stress about it. The feet take time. We need to get their teeth checked. And there's a list of things if they're not gaining weight, for example, that are pretty basic and they're not going to gain weight in a day. So adding kind of stress about it, or even quite frankly, staring at them too much.
Yes.
Actually really helpful. We do joke about benign neglect. We don't really do that, but we mentally do it.
Yeah, you have to, because you can make yourself a bit nuts. I have a friend who moved here from the Southwest, and obviously horse management is so completely different from that part of the country and this part of the country. And obviously her horse lost some weight and things like that. And I said, just wait till the grass comes in. Just hold on. If you can hold on and not panic, he's going to be just fine. Lo and behold, the first grass came in and he looked totally normal. And she's, I just have to relearn how to take care of a horse in this part of the country.
Yeah, it can be very different in different parts of the country.
Yeah. And coming from Texas, for me mostly, and then California, like we don't have the resources there that we have here as much.
Sure. And the West Coast horses with sand colic is a really big thing because they're usually living in small paddocks and so we don't have that necessarily issue here. And again, I think transitioning the horse from, let's say that we're in full training racing, The biggest transition, I think, is they're being stall kept. The diet they would have, being literally living in a stall, and they get the workouts and so forth. But introducing them to a small pen turnout, and then small paddock turnout, and then to paired turnout or small group turnout, I guess that's what Claire was saying, the expression of getting them back to be horses again.
Yeah.
We have an expression when you talk about region is we're so blessed here in Virginia that like these Virginia horses, again, from our background growing up in Southern California, they've got a ton of real estate. They have
good grass,
options of actual grass.
Yeah.
And depending on how many acres they have access to. But so we try to get them to be pretty Virginia horses as soon as possible. And
they mostly take to it very well. We've had a few that were difficult to gain, had trouble gaining weight. That's really like the marker. Obviously, some of them have come with feet that took a lot. We have the greatest farrier. So we actually give Alex free rein. Like we say, this is what we need the horse to do. Yeah. And I oftentimes pick up a foot after he's gone. I'm like, oh, he did something different. Like it's just whatever. He's so good at reading the horse and knowing what we need. And certainly we can talk to him about anything, which is, we know how blessed we are for that too, because it's a struggle for a lot of people. But yeah, it's when you just take a breath and you feed the horse properly, you look at him. I can't tell you exactly. Sometimes I read people's feed. So I don't know. Like I look out at our fields right now, or not, our fields are just mud. I look out at the fields full of horses, take their blankets off, and they all look great. And they are on a very simple feeding regimen. And when they need some help, they get some help with a few weight gain items. We do a liver detox regularly. We learned that was a pretty great.
Oh, that's interesting. It does make sense that you would want them to detox from just the type of nutrition they were having at the track. I'll never forget the last one I bought directly off the backside was 15.2, and he was eating something like 16 quarts of grain.
Exactly, right. Yeah.
And he wouldn't eat hay. They were like, oh, he doesn't eat hay. I was like, well, he's going to have to learn how to eat hay.
Right. Yeah. No, and we've been sent horses literally from all over the country. Yeah. So except for Alaska, we've been sent horses from California, Colorado, Arizona, Florida, New York, Canada. Anything on the West Coast, Western Canada, Eastern Canada. So there is a transition that they'll have to do, even if it was just regionally.
And they all get tick fever here
really
immediately too. So
I guess the idea is to keep it low stress as people. And because I think that's the biggest thing about weight gain or weight loss is when at high intensity and so forth.
Yeah. Years ago, we had a chiropractor was out for somebody's horse, and I was talking to him, and I apologize that I don't remember his name, but he was really nice. He's working on this horse, and he was asking something about what do we do when they first come off the track? Do we give them the ulcer garter and stuff like that? And I was like, typically no, unless we have a known issue. I was like, we just try to watch the horse and keep the stress low. And he said, I'll butcher it a little bit, but he said, how do you know their stress is low? And I laughed for a second because nobody had ever asked the question, but I was looking at the horse who was like sleeping with his head like on my shoulder. And I started laughing. I was like, we've lost so much common sense and horsemanship, I think, in the world. And he started to laugh because I just gestured. Like I was like, and he started to laugh and he was like, that's the best answer. He said, I always ask that question. I've never had anybody answer that way. And I was like, that's how.
Let the horse tell you. I think that we do a lot of, we were talking last time about all of the learning and evolution of what we know and don't know about taking care of horses, and we're in this pursuit of more knowledge all the time. But a lot of times it's just about listening and just simplifying. And I really think that it's very easy to cloud your brain and to get the opinions of a lot of other people. And obviously, like, we tread lightly with that as well. Like, we have done several disclaimers on our podcast where we're like, your mileage may vary. And what we're saying is stuff that's worked for us. We try to talk to people that have a similar viewpoint to us, but only because we want to share those positive messages, and not because we don't think that other approaches don't work or anything like that. But I think simplifying the care of horses, I think when you have too much going on, and like you said, I just got this horse off the track and my there's a voice in the back of my head that says maybe he's a little ulcery, but also he's just a high strung type that I have seen his emotional regulation over the last 6 weeks transform. And in return, his body has transformed in a really positive way. So for me, that's an indication of I'm on the right track. Let's keep it simple for now and see how he develops as his workload increases and how when I start asking him for a little bit more demanding in terms of what I'm asking him. So
I think another thing too is for Claire and I, we've seen, I guess I'm old enough now to say things like this, but over the decades, such extreme scenarios as well. I'm trying to think of one. And we've been very blessed because a lot of the owners or syndications that have sent us horses have really cared about their horse and followed up, and they financed the whole situation of the transition. For example, there was a horse that was sent from the West Coast to West Virginia, actually, to see if he was going to be sound enough to race out of in the state of West Virginia. And he wasn't. And so they didn't push it. But that they had heard about us, and we're only about 2 hours from Charlestown. They sent the horse to us, and long story short, he was going to need to have knee surgery to get chips out of his knee. And he was a 4-year-old and still a colt. And he was
very well endowed.
Basically, he needed to be under general anesthesia to be castrated.
Yeah.
So this poor horse wakes up and he has two new knees and he has no more testicles.
Right. He's what in the hell happened?
And John wanted to do everything he could for this horse to retire him correctly, and he did everything great. So we took the horse on literally the day he was discharged from the veterinary hospital. So obviously that horse, probably with the amount of antibiotics he needed to be on for a period of time,
he was a little stressed
post-surgically.
Yeah.
The horse was going to need to have some cultures and so forth for his gut, and probably stay on a little bit of GastroGuard because he was on high levels of non-steroidal anti-inflammatories for a little while. Those type of horses, again, it's pretty obvious that they're going to need some sort of gastro help. And they're going to need some probiotics, and they're going to need a real specific diet. And we've had horses too with some jaw issues, and they've had to have basically what we call a soup diet, so that their feed is basically made into almost a liquid. So when you see that many extremes, you want to just try to get the horses on just as natural, happy, healthy diet as possible.
Yeah. Really simplifying it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to actually stop the recording here and split this episode into 2 parts because we got to talking with Claire and Tom and we're having such a good time. I lost track of how long we were chatting with one another. Catch up with us next time to find out all about Claire and Tom's unique approach to reselling horses that they've trained and how they set their horses up for success in their second careers. If you like what you heard today, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can follow OTTB on Tap on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, and contact us with interview candidates and topic suggestions at OTTBontap.com. We love hearing from you. Cheers.